Hello friends, and welcome back to my channel. If anyone asks me what I did during recovery, the answer is read. I just can't stop reading and chugging through my TBR, and I'm having such a blast. I've been sitting on this massive collection of books that I've been wanting to read related to piercing and the piercing industry, and it's just been so fun going through all of them. So here is yet another recovery book review, and I expected to enjoy this one, but holy shit, did this just blast up to one of my higher recommended reads. ReSearch, Bob Flanagan, SuperMasochist. Now, I think when most of us think of the ReSearch productions, we think of Modern Primitives. That's like the big one that you think about, that you talk about. And I said before that Modern Primitives is probably one of the top on my recommended lists for anyone interested in reading about industry history, and there needs to be an addendum to that now. I think you have to read Modern Primitives, but then you have to read Bob Flanagan's SuperMasochist. I think they're a package deal. I think you've gotta read them both. Bob Flanagan was an incredible man and masochist who lived throughout the 60s, 70s, and was also someone with cystic fibrosis, which is a very severe, usually deadly disorder where your body overproduces mucus in your lungs, and it's very thick, and it traps bacteria, and you deal with scar tissue in the lungs and bacterial infections. It affects your stomach and your digestive system and your pancreas, and it was discovered in the mid-50s, and at that time it killed most people who had the disease while they were young children. It was uncommon for someone with CF to live to be relatively old. Bob Flanagan lives to be in his early 40s. And through his experiences with having CF and these medical procedures, he ends up growing up to be this very, very extreme masochist. And he talks about his experiences of being tied down as a young kid and given barium enemas as treatment, and big needles inserted directly into his chest to drain the mucus out of his lungs, and all of this stuff that he goes through in this treatment, and how when he was younger, his stomach would hurt so badly or his lungs would hurt so badly, and he would touch himself and it would make him feel better, and he began to associate these things in his mind. And he talks about this later on in life becoming this love for very extreme masochism. Now, this book is not for the lighthearted. This is very kink heavy. There's lots of explicit photos. There's lots of explicit images. Before you get it, maybe look at the Wikipedia page for Bob Flanagan, learn what he was about. He was an artist, a poet, a writer, a performance artist, and he regularly incorporated S&M into his performances. And so, this is an 18-up book. Bear that in mind if you're going to purchase it. But a big part of piercing history is also kink history. It's also BDSM history. There is so much overlap in this book with the Gauntlet, with the Janus Society that Jim Ward did a lot with, that then became Threshold. And this is just as important a part of our history to learn and acknowledge and respect as the other elements of it are. And what I think is interesting about this is, it's the same folks who did Modern Primitive. I don't want to say a tone of regret, but a tone of frustration with what Modern Primitives became. At this point, Modern Primitives is already out. Bob Flanagan actually did a performance for one of the release parties for Modern Primitives, and they're interviewing him a while after that. And they're discussing how originally it was this underground movement of people looking to explore things in their body and have these experiences in their body, and how magical and wonderful it was. And that now that the Modern Primitive movement has become a movement, it's become so widespread, it's become very culturally appropriative. It's become a lot of white people co-opting indigenous practices while doing nothing about genocide, ongoing genocide against indigenous populations, ongoing colonization and removal of indigenous spiritualities and belief systems. And it's a lot of, at this point, wealthy, well-off white people who are trying to justify their interest in tattoos and piercings via cultural appropriation rather than examining why they enjoy doing this. And there's this refreshingness to listen to Bob Flanagan talk about his experiences with body piercing, with play piercing. He extensively play pierces himself, particularly his genitals. over and over and over again. And he does not claim for it to be spiritual or a rite of passage or inspired by any of these things. He's like, I was a sick kid who had all this shit done to me by doctors, and I fetishized feederism and Porky Pig cartoons and Catholic scenes of suffering, and now I like to do weird shit to my junk, and it makes me feel good. And it's so refreshing. I'm going to read an excerpt from this. I have to be so careful opening this book to get to my marked pages, because there is maybe 3 photos in this whole thing that would be appropriate if they ended up on YouTube. So we're gonna open this very carefully and find my quote. So here we go. It starts with one of the, let me make sure. Okay, the back cover doesn't have anything bad on it. Okay, starts with our interviewer here. AJ, the whole modern primitives idea was not a defined subculture when we put out our book, Modern Primitives. These were individuals who were exploring personal visions. Then an underground emerged, and after that, the masses almost get the forms right, but not the spirit. It becomes this fashion, often with fake spirituality overlaid. It's nice to see so many tattoos and piercings as personal expression of symbols that are meaningful to the person, but unfortunately, a pretentious pseudo-religion lurks in the background. Bob. The guys who started Club Fuck in LA were genuine and sincere like Fakir. They started this scene, no different than I created with my work, but things just get away further and further from their original source. Ron Athey, one of the founders of Club Fuck, has a background which is really amazing. He was raised Pentecostal, so to turn from a holy roller into what he's become today, that's what intrigues me. Now he's breaking into performance art, and I hope it won't be this uniform pseudo-Nazi power lick my boot fantasy stuff. That's so boring, and I've seen it a million times at threshold meetings. AJ, I think that Fakir in building up a guru image is actually trying to create a religion, exactly the opposite of what we wanted to encourage in modern primitives. The whole concept of a guru is usually the perpetuation of authoritarian male control, and 99% of the time they are male. Hopefully we are entering a more mature age where people have enough self-respect and consciousness not to blindly follow anyone, just learn from many. Piercing, tattooing, or pain in themselves don't necessarily bring enlightenment. Bob, and there's so much money involved now. AJ, it's kind of like joining some kind of church or cult. So they're talking about as piercing is becoming an industry, it's becoming something to make money off of and commodify, the loss of what they viewed as this authentic spirituality and authentic nature in what they're doing. They go on to say, AJ, humans from time immemorial have had a desire to engage in rituals in which the defense mechanisms that keep us from confronting death and our aloneness are stripped away. It's really all about fear. The trap is in identifying the ritual as something other than a mere process, in overlaying a metaphysical essence. The irony is, thus you escape deeply confronting yourself. Bob, the best part of Fakir's show is when he talks about his personal history as a kid and shows slides documenting what he did. But to take that extra step and become the Fakir? What do you mean? You're Roland. It's much more interesting to be Roland Loomis working in an ad agency and coming home at night and suspending yourself by hooks in your chest. That's beautiful. But Fakir is silly. You're a cartoon now. You're the new Jim Jones. That whole interaction really resonated with me. And this is a video to review Blob Flanagan SuperMasochist. I'm not going to get into Fakir Musafar discourse. I have a lot of thoughts about it as someone who met and was acquainted with Fakir in his life, but also has seen a lot of the complaints from a lot of different people around the industry. But this discussion of like the path that many people were taking, where they started out as just these weird folks and weird kids who wanted to do different things with their body and got naturally drawn to these experiences. Bob Flanagan of being this extreme SM masochist, Fakir of exploring these body rituals, Jim Ward of doing these piercings. And it was this very like honest, raw thing they were doing. And at some point it became this personality, this larger than lifeness, this justify it away with the metaphysical, the spiritual, the religious, often pulling from different indigenous cultures as a way to justify these desires, instead of just saying, hey, I'm Roland Loomis, I work at an ad agency and I like to go home and hang myself from hooks into my skin, and that's enough for me. And I think we see that further and further in the industry now, with people feeling a need to use indigenous cultures or different cultures to justify why they do what they do, or almost as a way to make it socially acceptable. Like if we pitch this as this religious right, if we pitch this as these things, if we take from these cultures, then it's okay for us to do it, rather than just admitting that you're someone who enjoys these experiences, that you're someone who enjoys exploring pain this way, that this is an innate human desire and drive to want to do, that we have documentations from enough cultures around the world that it's kind of normal for humans to want to do weird shit to our bodies and explore what our bodies are physically capable of. I think it's a refreshing juxtaposition to the very grounded critiques of cultural appropriation that exist in modern primitives. And I think it is also very interesting to look at someone who explores piercing and pain from such a purely kink, very psychological. He psychoanalyzes the crap out of himself in this book and everything that caused him to want to explore these desires as an adult. It's a very interesting perspective. And it also brings up the conversation of chronic illness as it relates to BDSM, piercing, kink, suspension, and all of these practices, tattoos, all of it. So many of my clients and the people I know in these industries are people who struggle with chronic illness that come with chronic pain. And there's something so powerful about choosing pain, about consenting to pain, about having control over your pain. And I think that experience drives a lot of people who struggle with different disabilities and different illnesses to explore this. And Bob talks constantly about how he thinks the reason why he survived so long with CF is because of S&M and these extreme things that he does in his personal life. He's also just a very engaging narrator. He's got this amazing voice, this wonderful frankness. I found myself not just enjoying the discussion topics and the content of the book, but just enjoying the tonality and the voice of it. I just found it very fun to read. Bob is just so engaging and electric, and that life that you hear all of his friends describe him as having, and this big deal that they describe Bob as being, it comes off in these pages. You can see what a character he is. And I really enjoyed reading this one. I really think if you are super interested in piercing and body modification history, especially if you work in the industry or you're planning on working in the industry, Modern Primitives is a must read. It's such an important part of the documentation of modern piercing history, especially in America. But it has its drawbacks and it has its flaws. There's things about it and about the modern primitive movement that have not aged well and that were not ethical or correct things to do. And I think Bob Flanagan's SuperMasochist is a wonderful foil to modern primitives. To see someone so wholly interested in these same practices and these same things, but entirely in a kink and BDSM lens and way, and just unabashedly so. And you also do, through some of the interview questions and things like that, see, like I said, I think a little bit of the remorse for the transitional period of piercing going from this underground sort of pure motivated thing to an industry that now turns a profit, that now is a business and has all of the drawbacks of being industrialized like that. And this book, I think, kind of serves as a bridge between those two things. And I also just think this is equally an important part of modern piercing history as modern primitives and the spiritual side of it. There is no denying that a huge portion of why the piercing industry exists as it does today is because of extreme kink and extreme BDSM. And like it or not, piercing and tattooing still has a place in those scenes even today, very much so. So if you want to be well-rounded and well-educated in this industry, it's just as important to delve into that stuff as it is the spiritual stuff. I loved this book. It was so good. I'm following it up. I'm literally in the middle of reading his pain journal right now, which is a journal of the final years of his life and the pain he was going through from CF, and just sort of his experience of pain processing and what it's like as a masochist to have pain outside your control and the confrontation of your death. And it's very, very good. And I really love everything that he has written. And this is going right on the top of my media list on my blog, which I will link in the comment section down below for folks who are looking for more book recommendations. But this one was really good. This one was really, really good, and I think more folks in the industry should pick it up and read it. And I think Bob Flanagan should be a more household name in this industry. And yeah, thanks for sitting down and hanging out. I'm going to have book reviews into 2026 at this rate, that I am just blazing through my TBR pile. So I hope you are enjoying all of the book review content and all of the book content. If you ever go out and get one of the books because of my videos or my recommendations, please email me what you think about it. Shoot me a message, send me a DM on Instagram. I am so curious and I would love to chat with folks about this. And I will sit down and see y'all again next week. Bye.